everyone. Welcome back to St. Louis Teens. With the recent death of George Floyd and the protests and unrest that have continued to sweep our nation, we are here today with Pastor Robert White, who is a resident of St. Louis and, despite the pandemic, has traveled to the heart of the current movement in numerous cities around the nation. Pastor White is with the Peace of Mind Church of Happiness and the founder of Save My Sons. He was a prominent leader during the Ferguson movement in 2014 as well. So, Pastor White, your initiative and leadership in traveling to Minneapolis to bring peace to the situation is commendable and sets a great example. So, could you tell us a little bit about what made you take this brave step?
Well, first of all, Sri, thank you for having us, and you're kind in calling it a brave step. Definitely don't consider it bravery. It's actually a necessity. Being a black man in America who I believe was called to action, it was an effort primarily to learn from the mistakes that we had in Ferguson. Ferguson taught me one thing, and that was without unity, we will not prevail. And so when I was called back into action by some local leaders who said that my voice needed to be heard, the one thing I learned from Ferguson is that when I traveled across this country, I met some amazing people. I met some amazing leaders. I sat down with Bernice King and Martin King III. I sat with Al Sharpton. I sat with folks in Seattle and Dallas. And I learned from our elders the victories that they gained from their struggle for civil rights. And so what I wanted to do differently now is travel to various hot spots in the country to talk with the protesters and begin the process of formulating a national network of protesters, of people who are fed up, so that when the wind stopped blowing for George Floyd's death, when the calm comes back, that we can begin to prepare for the next unfortunate event that will happen in this country. And I say it that way because we know there will be another killing by a police officer towards an African-American male. And so I got away from St. Louis because I knew that Ferguson will erupt again. I knew that the protesting will erupt again. And I did not want to be in the midst of that process. A lot of us suffered from PTSD, including myself. So this is actually a healing mechanism for me to get out and travel and meet new faces, meet new sides of the struggle. I was sharing with my apostle today that I almost had a Mecca pilgrimage experience, kind of like Malcolm did when he broke from the Nation of Islam. He saw Islam from a black perspective, but when he began to travel across the world, he saw others' perspective. I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, and I believe the history of the city is one of the few cities in America that was created to study race mixing. And Columbus is a city that's been on fire, unfortunately, because of this murder by Brother George. And I watched and I stood and I protested with Caucasian Americans. Coming from St. Louis Street, it's one of the most segregated places I've ever experienced in my life. It's my hometown, but it's black and white there. And it was kind of interesting for me to have a different spiritual continence while I was sitting there on the front line with Caucasians. And then the buildings began to burn. And just like in Ferguson, the day after, we were out cleaning up this morning. And I was cleaning up alongside Caucasians. And for the first time in my experience with this struggle, I realized that there's two types of Caucasians to me, two types of white people. I think there's the white people who always feel like they're trying to help, always feel like they're trying to make people's better. They go Christianity to so-called third world countries, and they say we're trying to civilize these people. And I've been in the midst of whites doing this struggle over the last few years that almost felt like they were there to quote unquote civilize black people. But here in Columbus, I felt a different vibe. I felt that these were white folk who didn't feel like they were trying to help blacks. They felt like they were a part of the struggle. And I had to talk on a spiritual level because we know that in Christ there is no titles. There's no Greek, no Jew, no male, no female. And for the first time, I believe what happened and what's different between Brother George and what happened with Mike Brown and all the others is it's starting to bring people together for a common goal. And I think it's befitting. A lot of religious folks are celebrating the day of Pentecost today, which represents unity. And so when you talk about this bravadoiness, it's not bravery. It's a call from God to unify so that we can get on one accord, because as Dr. King said, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And so my goal right now is to continue to give a message of peace, unify, and deal with whatever we have to do to obtain that peace, even if there has to be some chaos along the way.
Well, I think it's definitely incredible the work that you have done in the past and you are doing now during this movement as well. So I do want to, on behalf of everyone here, commend you for that. I did want to sort of ask, because you now have firsthand experience at some of these different hotspots around the nation. How is the situation there?
Each situation is different, first and foremost, because each person's cry is different. I purposely did not go all the way to Minneapolis because that city is hurting. They have not laid to rest the death of Philando Castile. They have not laid to rest trusting the system and the system failing them. There was no vindication of that young man's death. And you had a city that tried their best to allow the system to work, and then this happens for them. And so I totally understand why they attacked the police departments. I understand why they created fire. Though I'm a man of peace, I understand that there is a time in the Bible that the Bible describes a time of war. War is not pretty. War is not peaceful. War is not kumbaya. War is bloodshed, it's death, it's violence. And war has been declared on the African American community. And so now this smaller community is fighting back. And so Columbus, Chicago, Dallas, I'm on the phone constantly, every day, every night, with different leaders in different cities. And the cities are just tired, because what happens is the wounds that happened in Baltimore, the wound that happened in Florida, the wound that happened in Ferguson, it's been reopened when you sit and watch a man cry for his mama while he was being killed, and nothing is going to be done. Third-degree murder charge? I didn't even know that existed. Third-degree murder. So hopefully they will amend the charges. They will go after the other officers, and for once, the injustice of America will be served. And I say it that way because we're asking for justice, but the symbol of justice is a scale that's not balanced and a person that's blindfolded. So I want to put notice out to those of us who are protesting, those of us who are crying out for justice. Be careful what you're asking for, because you're asking for something to not be fair and for it not to see you. So truly, we've been getting justice because it's been unfair and we have not been heard or seen. So we might want to change what we're calling for, and maybe we should start calling for equality.
And in your opinion, what would your idea be for the most efficient path to achieving justice and peace during this time?
What we all have to be careful of, Shree, is I got the answer. I got the solution. I honestly can say I don't know, but what I believe need to be tried is what the Bible talks about. I think it's Psalms 133 says that where there is unity, God commands his blessings to fall. Acts chapter 2 says when they were all on one accord. I watched a building that was set on fire last night when we went down today to clean up. That building was still burning. And the symbolism of that burning building is, I think, a metaphor of what we need as a whole world. And it's simply this. Firefighters attacked that fire, Shree, on every four sides and even on top of the roof. They were hosing down that fire. What has happened in our community is somebody on the left side of the building say, I got the answer. And they fight the flames alone, not realizing that the back end is burning. Or someone who's on the top of the roof pouring water down says, I got the answer, not realizing the fire is on the sides. So when we say attack it from an economic situation and that's all we need, or we say let's go vote and that's all we need, what we're not realizing is that fire is still burning somewhere else. So this call for saving my sons is that somebody needs to be on the back, somebody needs to be on the left, somebody needs to be on the right, somebody needs to be at the top, because we have got to attack this thing from all sides. So there's a political need. There's a spiritual need. The gang members need to be involved. The police need to be involved. The community need to be involved. Those with money, those without money. We have got to come together, and each person fulfills its portion so that the fire can stop burning. And if you know anything about fires, there's a tremendous amount of water that goes into putting a fire out. Because you can put the flames out, but it'll smolder and the fire will come back. And so we've been given welfare. We've been given different systems in education, and we've been given stimulus checks, and we've been given all these things, but it's not enough to put out that fire that's been burning for over 400 years against the African American male and our community. So I believe the solution is unity, and I believe that if we all attack at the same time, we can bring about the change that's been promised to us so much lately.
And it's that concept of bringing everyone together and unity that your message has always sort of been about that, and bringing about that unity between everyone and leaders from all different sectors. So who do you think are some of the key players right now that could come together to help this movement get the desired attention and achieve its goals?
The Bible says that if you put old wine in a new wineskin, it'll break. Those leaders that you're asking for, they're on various front lines right now. I speak against our established so-called leaders right now. I speak against the national approved or accepted leadership, because as much as this system has failed us, so have they. I cannot trust a man who started out poor, who sits in a mansion right now. Can't trust him to fight for me anymore. I can't trust a person who grew up in poverty and who grew up suffering. I can't trust him to make laws for me if he's been in Congress 5 terms. We have suffered through change. I call Barack Obama Black Jesus now, because he was an amazing person. But in 8 years, there were no laws changed. In 8 years, we still got 3 strikes and you're out. We still have improper laws against crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. In his years, Mike Brown happened. In his years, all that stuff happened. And so what we need is new leaders who are on the front lines right now while it's fresh, so that when they get in Congress, when they get into Senates, when they get into the White House again, it's enough people to make change. One person can't do it. We have 450 congressmen and 52 senators. If you put one person in to vote against 51 or one person in to go against 430, his voice will not be heard. Voting is very important. But we already got laws that says it's illegal to put your knee in a man's neck for 8 hours or 8 minutes. We already got laws that tell you don't shoot a kid in a Walmart. We already got laws to say, don't arrest a female like Sandra Bland and allow her to die. So we got laws already. What we need is a change of a system that allow those laws to be usurped based upon the color of someone's skin.
And I know that you were a big part of the Ferguson movement in 2014. From your experience, did our country make any progress, in these 6 years? I know that you were talking about, we already have the laws and what we need is sort of a change in the system. So have we seen any progress in terms of that change, or are we sort of in the same situation as back then?
I wish there was a measurable event. As a former scientifically minded person, We always talk about in experiments, you got controls and you got the non-controllables. I wish there was a number that can tell you yes or no to that answer. It feels different until this happens again. I just shared on my page right here in Columbus, a black man held his hands up. A white officer walked up and stood there and maced him. In the midst of everything that's going on, where's the resolve of that officer to not mace a person with their hands up? The change is going to come when, while we are at war, while this country is on fire, that those who are elected, those who are hired to make peace, they will operate in peace. So until a black man is pulled over and he's not asked to get out of the car, or he's not surrounded by 3 different cars and weapons drawn, until a man can walk his dog in the park in New York and the police are not called on him, you got to understand, we're in this place because of a counterfeit $20 bill. A counterfeit $20 bill. You don't call 911 for that. You take that bill, allow your cameras to identify the person that gave that bill, and you deal with the business as you're instructed to. And 911 is not that reason. So when people in this country, particularly white people, understand that calling 911 is not the solution, it's creating problems. And so part of this Save My Sons movement that we're going to do is we're going to implement and try to implement throughout this country a neighborhood watch program that will partner this community with the police department so that we can help police the police, and we can help teach police officers cops how to police our community. So, man, listen, it wasn't created in a day. It's not going to be fixed in a day. We're dealing with a 400-year problem ever since we came to this country. And if I'm afraid, if this country is not willing to work with us, then we're going to have to look at other means in which other people who have been oppressed have gained their freedom, including this country. In order for America to become America, there had to be a war. There had to be an unrest between America and Great Britain. And with 400 million African Americans in this country, we're at the brink of self-destruction and civil war. And so we have to be careful, because I don't think anybody wants that.
And, looking back at, history a little bit, I did want to, going back to the Ferguson situation, what do you think from those protests and the unrest then and the movement then, what do you think has worked and what do you think has not worked?
What has not worked, and I think this is across the country, is to go back to the burning fire. Just because the flames are gone, we can't say we've arrived. You walk away from a fire that hasn't been properly watered, and it'll come back. I believe what happened is we changed police officers in Ferguson. We got Wesley Bell elected to the St. Louis County. We had Kim Gardner to the Circuit Attorney's Office. All these great things happened. Bruce Franks became a alderman. And what happened is, I think we all settled back in. The pain that's going on right now, nobody can live with for years to come. But one thing our Jewish brethren has done so well that I wish African Americans and black people all over the world would do is they have developed this mantle of never again. Never again will they be enslaved in concentration camps, and they embed that in their children. They teach it to them. We have got to remind our people of the suffering that we're enduring right now. America needs to be reminded of the burning buildings and the riots, so that we can collectively say we will never again allow this to happen. So we will always have our antennas up for any sign of racism, any sign. So you got to understand, 3 other cops stood there and watched this cop do that. That's symbolic of in the workplace when you see racism and say nothing. Or in Congress when they park belly these bills that they know are not fair to a group of society, but they pass it anyway because their portion of the lobbyist bill is passed. So we all are standing around watching stuff happen, and so that's what has not worked. What has worked is the awareness of need for change. We will see in November how much the voting will be different. We still have an imbalance of registered voters, and then jobs, man. What are jobs? I have no idea what the jobs are. So we need more jobs, and we don't have them.
And finally, what would your overall message be to America, the viewers, and in terms of how everyone can help this situation and bring justice to this situation as a whole?
I mean, the message that I'm speaking right now is unity. The message I'm going to speak till I die is unity. But we have to be united on one accord. Not the same accord, which is different, but united on one accord, which means everything that you're doing is moving towards the black race not being treated like dogs. If you're on this thing to self promote, if you're on this thing to riot, you have to be doing this because you want to see the black race treated like a human being. Those are the folks that I want to unite with and partner with, and realize that no man is an island. We can't do it on our own, and we need each other to make it work. So that's my message. Let's unite to change a system that is designed. We have a constitution that was built with having me as 5/8 of a human being.
And Pastor White, we understand that this is a difficult time, not just for you, but for many people around the nation. And we would like to thank you so much for taking the initiative to help unite us all during these difficult times and be a critical part of this movement. So thank you so much for your time.
All right, man. Thank you for the work you're doing and getting the message out, and I'll see you soon.